He walked into the pet store with simple steps, just wanting to buy a bone for the dog that had saved his life. But when the owner of the store looked at the animal, she froze. She approached silently, her eyes filled with tears, because that dog, she had seen it before, in a photo that never left her memory. Subscribe to our channel now and discover the reunion that made even the store owner break down in tears. The rumble of the old rusty orange Ford F-150's engine echoed down the main street of Pine Valley, breaking the typical silence of that autumn morning in rural Colorado. The older residents raised their heads and exchanged knowing glances. They recognized that sound well. When that pickup appeared in town, it meant that Samuel Peterson had come down from the Rocky Mountains. Nobody knew exactly where Samuel lived. Some said it was in an abandoned farm near the Wyoming border. Others swore he lived in an isolated cabin high in the mountains, without electricity or cell service. The only certainty was the unmistakable figure of that nearly 60-year-old man, face weathered by the sun, always accompanied by Rusty, a dog with tawny fur mottled with white that seemed to understand every word his owner said. Samuel was a man of few words. He came down to town every 3 or 4 months to buy essentials, rock salt, coffee, kerosene for his lamps, and occasionally some tool. He greeted acquaintances with a nod of his head, took care of his business, and returned to the isolation of the mountains before sunset. But on that day, the purpose was different. Samuel parked his truck in front of Paws & Co., the only pet shop in town, opened just over 2 years ago by Victoria Andrews, a New Yorker who had abandoned the hustle and bustle of the big city in search of the tranquility of rural Colorado. "Let's go, Rusty. You deserve this," Samuel murmured, patting the animal's head before getting out of the vehicle. Rusty had completed 10 years of faithful companionship, 10 years since Samuel had found him, still a puppy, wandering with an injured paw along an abandoned trail. The dog had become more than a companion. He was a guardian. He had alerted Samuel about sudden floods, scared away mountain lions that prowled around the chicken coop, and one early morning had persistently woken him moments before a fire consumed the hay shed. The doorbell of the pet shop tinkled softly when Samuel pushed it open. Rusty followed him with calm steps, typical of a dog that knows its place in the world. "Good morning. Welcome to Paws & Co.'s," Victoria greeted automatically, while organizing shelves of dog food. Victoria was a 42-year-old woman with light brown hair tied in an unpretentious bun. When she turned to look at the newcomer, her smile instantly froze. Her eyes, however, weren't fixed on Samuel but on the dog at his side. "Oh my God," she whispered, dropping the box of dog toys she was holding. Colorful pieces scattered across the floor, but Victoria didn't move to pick them up. She remained motionless, as if she had seen a ghost. The color had drained from her face. Rusty, in turn, tilted his head slightly to the side, his attentive eyes fixed on the woman, as if trying to remember something from long ago. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" asked Samuel, disconcerted by her reaction. Victoria didn't respond immediately. She ran her hand through her hair, further disheveling her bun, and slowly approached the dog. She knelt before him, trembling, cautiously extending her hand. "It could be... No, it's not possible," she murmured to herself. "Are you all right, ma'am?" Samuel insisted, now genuinely concerned. Victoria raised her teary eyes to him. "Give me a minute, please, just a minute." She hurriedly stood up and disappeared through a door at the back of the store. Samuel exchanged a confused look with Rusty, who maintained the same alert posture, as if something extraordinary was about to happen. Victoria returned less than 2 minutes later, carrying an old wooden box. With hands still trembling, she placed it on the counter and removed several photographs faded by time. "Look at this," she said, extending one of the photos to Samuel. The image showed a teenage girl with braces hugging a dog that was the exact image of Rusty when he was a puppy. The resemblance was too striking to be a coincidence. On the back of the photo, a date written by hand, January 2001. "This dog is identical to Rusty when I found him," commented Samuel, his voice hoarser than usual. "It's not identical," replied Victoria, emotion making her voice falter. "It's the same dog, it's Buddy." Samuel frowned, incredulous. Buddy? His name is Rusty. No, sir. This dog's name is Buddy, and he belonged to me 20 years ago, Victoria asserted with growing conviction. Look at these patches on his chest. This color pattern on his right front paw. It's him, I'm absolutely certain. The conflict was established. Samuel held the photograph as if it were a strange object, trying to understand how this would be possible. Victoria, meanwhile, knelt again before the dog, calling him by his old name. Buddy, do you remember me, boy? The dog moved. His ears but remained at Samuel's side, as he had done for the past 10 years. You're confusing things, ma'am, said Samuel, returning the photo. I understand the resemblance is strong, but... I'm not confusing anything, interrupted Victoria, now firmly. 20 years ago, my family was camping in the Aspen area, near the border with Wyoming. There was a terrible storm and Buddy got scared by the thunder. He ran after some wild animal and disappeared into the woods. We spent days looking, even hired local guides, but we never found him again. Victoria took another photo from the box, this one showing the same teenager crying next to lost dog posters attached to posts. It was one of the worst moments of my life, she continued. I was 16, and that dog was everything to me. I never stopped thinking about him. Samuel removed his hat and ran his hand through his graying hair, visibly disturbed. The story made sense. The region where he had found Rusty was less than 12 miles from the Wyoming border, close to Aspen, and the dog really did have a scar on his paw when he found him. I found him wandering among rocks with an injured paw, Samuel finally revealed. He was skinny, dehydrated. I took him home, cared for him, and we've been together ever since. It never crossed my mind that he might have had a previous owner. A heavy silence fell over the store. Both looked at the dog, who seemed oblivious to the drama unfolding. For him, that moment was just another fragment of the present, with no connection to the distant past. And what did you come here for today? Asked Victoria, trying to regain control of the situation. Samuel hesitated before answering. A bone. A special bone to celebrate the 10 years since I found him. He saved me from many difficult situations up in the mountains. Victoria nodded, slowly, absorbing the information. 10 years of stories and memories that didn't belong to her. 10 years in which Buddy, or Rusty, as he was called now, had built a new life alongside that rugged man. I think we need to talk more about this, she said, gathering the scattered photos. Do you have time for coffee? Samuel looked at his wristwatch, an automatic gesture of someone who rarely has appointments. Yes, I do. Victoria turned the door sign to closed and led Samuel and the dog to the small kitchen at the back of the store. While the coffee water boiled in the kettle, they both sat on opposite sides of a wooden table, with the dog lying exactly in the middle, like a physical bridge between two worlds that had just collided. The question hung in the air, unspoken but present. Whose dog was he, after all? The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the small kitchen, while Victoria and Samuel shared stories about the dog, who somehow belonged to both worlds. Did he always have that habit of hiding his favorite toys under the sofa? Asked Victoria, with a nostalgic smile. Still does, confirmed Samuel. I have a whole box of toys, but he always chooses that blue rubber ball to hide. My God, the same habit, exclaimed Victoria, bringing her hands to her face. And does he still make that strange noise when he sees birds through the window? Samuel couldn't contain a discreet laugh. Like an old engine trying to start. Yes, he does. Each coincidence, each shared habit reinforced Victoria's conviction. This was indeed her Buddy. The tears she tried to disguise weren't just from sadness over the 2-decade separation, but also from relief in knowing her dog had found a loving home. I need to show you something, said Victoria, rising to fetch another box stored in the kitchen cabinet. When we adopted Buddy, he participated in an experimental microchip identification program. It was a novelty at the time. Only some kennels and NGOs had access to the technology. She opened the box and removed a yellowed envelope containing old documents. Here's the chip implantation certificate and the registration number. If it's really Buddy, this chip should still be in him. Samuel examined the document with a serious expression. He had never taken Rusty to a veterinarian in the big city. Vaccines were administered by old Jim, a neighboring rancher who treated animals in the region with traditional knowledge. Dr. Lisa comes to town on Wednesdays, continued Victoria. She has a microchip reader. If you allow, we could check. The Fiwe rancher looked at the dog, who was watching both with attentive eyes, as if understanding the complexity of the situation. All right, he finally agreed. But what if it is your dog? What do you intend to do? The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Victoria didn't have a ready answer. In her mind, in the hundreds of times she had imagined reuniting with Buddy, she had never considered that he might have built a life with someone else. I don't know, she answered honestly. Legally, if the chip confirms it, he's mine. But 10 years isn't a short time, completed Samuel, his deep voice carrying the weight of the possibility of losing his companion. The following Wednesday, Samuel returned to town with Rusty for the meeting with the veterinarian. He had stayed at a small rural hotel, something unthinkable in his usual visits to town, which always ended before sunset. The veterinary clinic operated in an adapted house with a side garden where animals could wait outdoors. Dr. Lisa, a black woman in her early 40s with a colorful lab coat full of paw print patterns, received them with the calmness of someone who has seen many unusual stories involving animals. So this is our mysterious patient, she commented, petting Rusty, who surprisingly seemed at ease with the touch of that stranger. The procedure was quick. The veterinarian passed the electronic reader over the dog's back between the shoulder blades, where microchips are usually implanted. At first, nothing happened. She tried again, slightly changing the position. Old chips sometimes migrate. A bit under the skin, she explained. On the third attempt, the device emitted a beep and showed a sequence of numbers on the display. Lisa consulted the documents brought by Victoria and confirmed it's an exact match. Serial number AX 20011145. This is definitely Buddy. The consultation room plunged into a dense silence. Samuel felt as if the ground had been pulled from beneath his feet. Victoria, in turn, brought her hands to her mouth, divided between the euphoria of confirmation and the awareness of what it meant for the man in front of her. Well, from a legal standpoint, the animal belongs to Ms. Andrews, explained the veterinarian, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. The microchip is considered proof of ownership in cases like this. Samuel nodded slowly, without saying a word. He knew the laws of the world, even living apart from it. He knew he had no legal right over Rusty, or Buddy, as had just been proven. I need some time, he finally murmured, standing up. Come on, Rusty. The dog, sensing the tension in the environment, promptly followed his owner, but not without first looking at Victoria, as if he too needed to process that strange reunion of worlds. For the next 2 days, Samuel wandered around town and its surroundings, always with Rusty by his side, reflecting on what to do. He was a man of rigid principles who would never fight for something that didn't legitimately belong to him. But the dog was more than property. He was family, the only living being with whom he shared his solitary existence in the mountains. On Trow, the third day, while walking through the town's central square, he spotted Victoria sitting on a bench, leafing through a book. She raised her eyes when Samuel's shadow fell across the pages. "Can we talk?" he asked. Victoria closed the book and gestured for him to sit. At that exact moment, something unexpected happened. Rusty, who always stayed glued to Samuel, moved a few steps away and sat in the middle of the path between them, as if he were physically divided between the worlds. "Seems like he understands more than we imagine," commented Victoria with a sad smile. "He always has," confirmed Samuel. "Miss Victoria, I've thought a lot these days. Please, just call me Victoria." "Victoria," he corrected himself, uncomfortable with the intimacy. "I've decided I'll respect what's right. The dog is yours, always has been. I won't dispute that." Victoria felt her heart tighten at the nobility of that rugged man, so different from the city men she was used to. "You have my address," he continued, extending a paper with a handwritten note. "When you want to pick up Russ, buddy, I'll be waiting." He stood up and called the dog with a discreet whistle. The animal hesitated for the first time in 10 years, looking from Samuel to Victoria before finally following his owner. Victoria watched them walking away, the tall, stooped figure of the man and the dog with its elegant walk, while an idea began to form in her mind. An idea that might reconcile past and present without causing new wounds. That night, Samuel was sitting on the porch of the rural hotel, contemplating the stars that shone intensely in the country sky, when he heard the sound of a car approaching. Rusty, lying at his feet, raised his head even before the headlights illuminated the entrance. It was Victoria driving a blue Jeep Cherokee. She parked and walked to the porch, carrying a small box in her hands. "Sorry for showing up without warning," she said. "No problem," replied Samuel, indicating the empty chair beside him. Victoria sat down and placed the box on the rustic table between them. Inside was a large bone wrapped in gift paper and a handwritten card. "To celebrate 10 years with you," she explained. "After all, that's why you came to town, isn't it?" Samuel felt a lump in his throat. "Thank you," he managed to say. "But—" "I didn't come to take Buddy," interrupted Victoria, noticing the man's anguish. "Actually, I came to make a different proposal." She took a deep breath before continuing. "I spent the whole day thinking about what would be fair for all of us, including him." She pointed to the dog, who was now watching them attentively. "And I realized it would be cruel to separate you after so long. I had my time with him when I was a teenager. You gave him a full life when I couldn't." Samuel's eyes shone under the dim light of the lantern. "What exactly are you proposing?" he asked cautiously. "That he stays with you, but that I can be part of his life too," replied Victoria. "Regular visits. Maybe he could stay with me when you need. To be away from the ranch, shared custody, let's say." The term, typical of divorce proceedings in big cities, sounded strange in that rural setting, but the idea itself made sense to Samuel. "That would be possible," he responded slowly, like someone testing the ground before stepping. At that moment, Rusty got up, approached Victoria, and for the first time since the reunion, rested his head on her lap, in a gesture that seemed to seal the agreement even before the humans made it. "I think he approves," commented Victoria, with tears in her eyes while caressing the dog's soft ears. Samuel observed the scene with a mixture of emotions he hadn't experienced in a long time. There was something inexplicably right about that moment, as if an invisible circle was closing. "I have an idea," Victoria suddenly said. "Why don't you show me the place where you two live? I'd like to know his world, your world." The proposal was unexpected. Samuel had never taken anyone to his property in the mountains. It was his refuge, his private sanctuary. But something had changed. The solitary universe he had built now seemed too small to contain the new reality unfolding before him. Morning came with the typical fog of the Rocky Mountains, wrapping the peaks in an ethereal embrace. Samuel, against all his habits, had invited Victoria to visit his property. They departed at dawn, the F-150 climbing increasingly steep and narrow dirt roads. "How do you manage to come down this road during the rainy season?" asked Victoria, holding onto the dashboard as the vehicle jumped over a rock. "Sometimes I can't," Samuel replied simply. "I get isolated for weeks. Rusty and I have supplies for at least 3 months." Victoria observed the landscape that was gradually transforming. The pastures gave way to denser vegetation, with pine trees dotting the horizon. Rusty traveled in the truck bed as he always did, his muzzle raised to catch the familiar smells of the mountains. After almost 2 hours of travel, they reached a wide clearing where a surprising construction stood. It wasn't the rustic cabin Victoria had imagined, but a solid house of stone and wood, with a porch that surrounded the entire structure. Around it, a well-tended orchard, a fenced garden, and further on, a small corral with some goats. "It's amazing," murmured Victoria, genuinely impressed. "Did you build this by yourself?" "Most of it," confirmed Samuel, parking under an improvised cover. The main structure already existed when I bought the land. It was an old rest station for cattle drivers. I've been renovating it little by little. Rusty jumped from the truck, bared as soon as the engine silenced, and ran toward a stream that cut through the property, as if wanting to show Victoria his favorite spot. "He always does that when we arrive," commented Samuel with a discreet smile. "I think it's his way of saying we're home." Throughout the day, Samuel showed Victoria his small world. The chicken coop where he collected fresh eggs every morning, the greenhouse where he cultivated medicinal herbs, the barn rebuilt after the fire from which Rusty had saved him. With each step, each shared story, the bond between the man and the dog became more evident and profound in Victoria's eyes. "You have an incredible life here," she commented as they had coffee on the porch, watching the sun begin to set behind the mountains. "I understand why Rusty seems so happy." "It's not a life for everyone," replied Samuel, "but it's enough for us." There was a silent question in Samuel's statement, a doubt about how Victoria's entry into that equation would affect the perfect balance they had built. She noticed the hesitation between the lines. "I don't intend to change any of this," she assured, as if reading his thoughts. "I just want to be a part of it, even from a distance." As night fell, while Samuel prepared a simple meal of garden vegetables and jerky, Victoria found a notebook on a rustic shelf. Opening it, she discovered it was a kind of diary of Samuel and Rusty's adventures. Each page contained a date and the record of some significant event. The dog's first successful hunt, the day they encountered a mountain lion in the vicinity, the time Rusty prevented Samuel from drinking water from a contaminated source. "You document everything," observed Victoria, moved by the man's dedication. "I like to remember," he replied, placing the plates on the rustic table. "When you live alone, memories are good company." That night, sitting around the fireplace, the conversation naturally turned to the practical details of the agreement they had outlined. "I thought of something," said Victoria, absent-mindedly caressing Rusty's ears, who was resting between the two. "I have knowledge of digital marketing. I could help sell the products from your garden and medicinal herbs to a larger audience. Many people in the big city would pay good money for organic products cultivated in a traditional way." The proposal caught Samuel by surprise. He had never thought of his production beyond what was necessary for his own sustenance and some exchanges with distant neighbors. "I don't know if I want that kind of attention," he responded frankly. "I understand your concern," agreed Victoria. "But think about this. Extra income would allow improvements to the property, maybe the construction of that dam you mentioned for raising fish." Samuel pondered the idea in silence, watching the flames dance in the fireplace. Indeed, there were projects he could never realize due to lack of resources, and the way Victoria spoke didn't sound like an invasion, but like a partnership. "I can think about it," he finally conceded. 3 months passed since that first visit. The dynamic between Samuel, Victoria, and Rusty established itself in a surprisingly natural way. Victoria went up to the mountain every 2 weeks, always bringing some novelty for the dog, a special toy, gourmet dog food, a soft blanket for cold nights. Samuel, in turn, began to come down to town more frequently. At first, he justified the visits as necessary to discuss the details of the new business that, against all expectations, he had decided to start with Victoria's help. Mountain Essentials, as they named the venture, began modestly with the sale of medicinal herb packages cultivated by Samuel. They soon expanded to artisanal jellies, wild honey, and the most popular item, organic dog biscuits, inspired by the recipes Samuel had created for Rusty. Victoria's pet shop transformed, gaining an exclusive section for mountain products. On social media, the story of the reunion between Buddy Rusty and his former owner, told with discretion and respect for Samuel's privacy, captivated followers and significantly increased sales. On a particularly pleasant spring Sunday, while organizing a stand for the local fair, Victoria noticed a subtle change in Samuel. The stern and reserved man now smiled more frequently, interacted with customers, and had even accepted the cell phone she had insisted on giving him for business emergencies. "You're different," she commented as they arranged products at the stand. "Different how?" he asked, genuinely curious. "More present, as if you'd come out of that cocoon you built in the mountains." Samuel reflected on the observation. It was true. Something had changed. Victoria's constant presence in his life had brought colors he didn't even know were absent. "Maybe it's the big city influence," he joked in a rare display of humor. Victoria laughed, but there was something unspoken hanging between them, a dull, pleasant tension that grew with each meeting, each shared project, each moment of complicity, as they watched Rusty playing in the stream or sleeping peacefully between them on the mountain porch. The turning point occurred when Rusty, now almost 11 years old, began to show signs of fatigue. His runs became less frequent, his naps longer. Nothing alarming, just the natural course of life for a dog of his age, but enough to awaken in Samuel an acute awareness of the passage of time. "He's been living a good life," commented Victoria one afternoon as they watched the dog sleeping in the late afternoon sun. "The best I could give," agreed Samuel, a knot of emotion making his voice deeper. "When I found him, I promised myself I would do everything to make up for the suffering he must have gone through lost on those trails." "And you've kept that promise every day," assured Victoria, covering Samuel's calloused hand with hers. The touch, simple and brief, triggered something both had been repressing for months. Samuel turned to face her, his eyes reflecting a mixture of vulnerability and determination. "Victoria," he said with the same seriousness with which he made all important decisions, "I think I'm learning to like your company more than I should." The declaration, awkward and direct like the man himself, drew a luminous smile from Victoria. "What a coincidence," she replied, intertwining her fingers with his, "because I'm certain I like your company exactly as I should." That night under the starry sky of the mountains, two worlds that seemed irreconcilable finally merged, united by love for a dog who, by an extraordinary twist of fate, belonged to both. The following spring, while Rusty rested comfortably on the porch with his 12 well-lived years, Samuel shared with Victoria an idea he had been secretly cultivating. "I want to build something special," he explained, unrolling a rudimentary hand-drawn plan. "A memorial, not to mourn what will end, but to celebrate what we've had." The project was for a resting area near the stream where Rusty had been found, a rustic bench under a wooden pergola, protected by a small roof for rainy days. Beside it, a carved wooden plaque with the words, "Here began a journey that united 3 lives." "It's beautiful, Samuel," murmured Victoria, moved by the sensitivity hidden behind the rugged facade of this man. "I thought we could plant jabuticaba trees around it," he continued, pointing at the drawing. "They take time to grow but last for generations, like some stories." Victoria nodded, understanding the profound symbolism of the gesture. It wasn't just a memorial for the dog who would inevitably leave them one day. It was the construction of a legacy, of a story that would transcend time and the improbable circumstances that united them. In the months that followed, Mountain Essentials prospered beyond the most optimistic expectations. The story of the unusual trio, the reclusive rancher, the former New Yorker, and the dog who belonged to 2 worlds, became known in the region, attracting customers and curious visitors. Victoria, who initially planned to spend just a few years in the countryside before returning to New York, realized she had found her true home in the mountains. Samuel, in turn, discovered that his refuge didn't need to be solitary to remain a sanctuary. As for Rusty, or Buddy, as Victoria sometimes still called him in moments of nostalgia, he seemed to have achieved the perfect balance between his 2 lives. He spent some nights in town in the house Victoria maintained above the store, and others in the mountains, always on the rug beside Samuel's bed. And so it was that, on a golden autumn afternoon, the 3 could be seen sitting at the newly built memorial by the stream. Rusty, with his graying muzzle resting on his paws, observed with serene eyes the special bone that lay untouched at his feet, the same one that had motivated that first visit to the pet shop, now preserved as a symbol of everything that came after. Samuel, with his arm around Victoria's shoulders, contemplated the sky that was beginning to be tinged with the colors of twilight. The loneliness that had for so long been his only companion had disappeared without a trace, replaced by a fullness he had never imagined possible. "You know what I think sometimes," murmured Victoria, breaking the comfortable silence. "What?" asked Samuel, his thumb absent-mindedly caressing her shoulder. That maybe it wasn't by chance. Maybe Buddy knew exactly what he was doing when he got lost in that storm so long ago. Maybe he needed to find you first, to then bring us together. Samuel smiled, allowing himself to believe in that magical possibility. After all, after everything they had lived through, who could say with certainty what was destiny and what was coincidence? On the horizon, the sun slowly descended, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, while three hearts beat in harmony, united by bonds that transcended time, distance, and even the logic of ordinary life. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Samuel, Victoria, and Rusty has touched your hearts. To continue this journey of emotions, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about reunions and second chances. Find it here, clicking to the left. If you enjoyed this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave your like on the video. Daily we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the human connections that define us. Share in the comments if you've ever experienced a special reunion that changed your life. We'd love to hear your stories too.